Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. We're going to go ahead and get this event started. First of all, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you this afternoon, and especially to our speaker, Valika Smeulders, whom I will introduce in just a minute. My name is Damian Pargas. I am a professor of North American history at Leiden University, specialized in the history of slavery in North America. And I'm also the director of the RIAS, the Roosevelt Institute for American Studies, that's organizing this lecture today. For those of you who have never attended one of these lectures organized by us before, the RIAS is a research institute, an archive and a conference center formerly affiliated with Leiden University. We organize conferences and events that deal with all kinds of issues that are related to US history and transatlantic relations. But we also invest in public outreach, here in the province of Zeeland, where the RIAS is located. Each year we host public lectures like this one, but also webinars and workshops that are specifically aimed at stimulating public discourse on issues that affect both American and Dutch society. And it goes almost without saying that the history of slavery currently constitutes a major theme in public discourse in both the United States and the Netherlands. In the past couple of years, we've witnessed a real reckoning with slavery that I think is unique in contemporary history on both sides of the Atlantic. On both sides of the Atlantic, we've seen state apologies issued. We've seen monuments erected and others torn down. We've seen an explosion of academic research and media interest in the histories of slavery in the Atlantic world and the legacies of slavery in both of our societies. We've also seen a bit of a backlash against this reckoning, both in the US and in the Netherlands. And so I feel like expert voices are needed now more than ever. It's with this in mind that the RIAS sought to organize events this year aimed at facilitating a public dialogue about slavery, and not just about the history of slavery, but also about the memory of slavery, so how we think about it, how we talk about it in our societies today. Last October, we organized an event with Nicole Hannah-Jones that many of you attended, the founder of the 1619 Project. A few weeks ago, we organized a transatlantic webinar with Manisha Sinya and Koen van Galen, two expert historians, to talk about the simultaneous but very different experiences of emancipation in the US South and the Dutch Caribbean. And today we have the honor of hosting a Roosevelt Lecture on how to speak about slavery from the context of museums, specifically the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. I feel like this is the right time to talk about these themes, and not just up in Amsterdam, but also here in Zeeland, here in Middelburg. Zeeland, as a province, has a long history of slave trading and plantation slavery in Suriname, which started out as a colony of the province. And public discussions about slavery are very much front and center right now in this province. There are plans to establish an educational research center on slavery here in Middelburg. Many of the brains behind this project are here with us today. This year also marks the 160th anniversary of the Emancipation Law in the Dutch colonies, and the 150th anniversary of the end of staatstoezicht. It's taken us a century and a half, I feel, to really reckon with slavery in a meaningful way. And I'm hoping that this is only the beginning. So we're very grateful to have Valika join us today, come all the way down here from Amsterdam, to share her perspectives and her expertise with us as someone who is very much at the forefront of helping to shape national discourse in the Netherlands on the history and memory of slavery in the Dutch world. We look forward to an insightful and fruitful discussion. Please do hold your questions until after Valika's lecture. Also turn off your mobile phones so that they don't disturb during the lecture. Before I hand the floor to Valika, I would like to introduce her properly, if that's possible. Valika Smeulders is currently head of the Department of History at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Valika studied languages and cultures of Latin America at Leiden University, and she got her PhD from the Erasmus University of Rotterdam on a dissertation titled Slavernij in Perspectief. From 2017 to 2019, she was curator at the Rijksmuseum, and at the same time did her postdoctoral research at KITLV, the Royal Netherlands Institute of Southeast Asian and Caribbean Studies in Leiden. working on a joint research project called Traveling Caribbean Heritage with Gert Oost-Indie, I think, right? In 2019, Valika Smeulders received the Black Achievement Award in the category of Education and Research, and today she will be talking to us about speaking about slavery, the Rijksmuseum, its collections, and research. Valika, thank you so much for coming down here today. It's an honor to have you. The floor is yours. Leave this here just in case.
So how does the PowerPoint work?
Yes, this little arrow goes to the next slide. So like this.
Okay, a touch screen.
Yes, it's a touch screen. We're super modern here.
Yes. Now I have to turn something on. Yeah, it's green. Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming down, especially during this weather, of course, because it was very Dutch. And thank you so much for the Roosevelt Academy and Damien Pargas for inviting me to come down, which is my pleasure, of course. We need to do this much more. Just 2 days ago, I was with my whole department in Texel, and we had a wonderful day because we need to get much more of a vision of the complete Netherlands and the history we need to be speaking about. And yes, we in Amsterdam tend to think to stick too much to Amsterdam, so we'll be traveling a lot more. Thank you for the introduction. As Damien already touched upon, I've been involved in the theme of slavery history for quite a while now, for at least about 20 years. And I've been in different positions in this field. So I've been in the academic world, I've been in the museum world, but I've always also been outside of that. And I'll be speaking from that experience of being part of the institutional world, but also when you have to push against it, I know what it feels like. So I'm drawing upon all of that. But since I am now the head of the Department of History at the Rijksmuseum will be at the core of what I'm speaking about. Not because I think that the Rijksmuseum is the most important player in this field, not at all. We're just one of the many players. But because from my position I'm able to speak about it. And I think it's really important, and you'll see that throughout my lecture, that it is really important that we stick together, that we do this together. We would not have come this far if not together. So, touch screen, and I have my paper on this. Yes, all of you know the Rijksmuseum, of course. I want to take you a little bit back in time because I think we've come a long way, and it is worth our while to just look back for a little bit, because where we are now, we didn't just stumble upon it. It happened because of a lot of hard work for a lot of people. So at the end of the 20th century, when you spoke about historiography in the Netherlands, it was really this blank space that you see here. It was because of a division in the way that the academic world approached history. We were either speaking about national history, about what happened here in the Netherlands, or about colonial history, and the two fields hardly met. So at the end of the 20th century, it was on an international platform. It was the UNESCO of the United Nations that started pushing against that started bringing to the fore that we need to look at this history from another angle, especially in museums. Because museums until then, when they spoke about the 17th, the 18th, the 19th century in the Netherlands, it was mostly about an economic narrative, about how this little country became so big because it dared to cross the seas and sail to other parts of the world, and it got things from there which made this country big. But in the end, it looked like it was just because of what the Dutch were able to do, that they deserved what they got, that they deserved this economic success, that they deserved this political position in the world. And what happened to the people that lent their hands to build this wealth was completely left out. So The UNESCO, which we know of from the 70s on, had this list of World Heritage. In the 90s started pushing the envelope and said we need to have a broader look at our history. We need to have a historiography that is more inclusive of what happened in different parts of the world in cohesion. So they said when you look at that era, it should be about international history. That was Routes of Slavery that commenced in 1994. From 1998, they said that we should also be breaking the silence. So it should just be about economic history, but it should include the social history of the people that were enslaved and the people that were the contract laborers in later eras. And then from 2003 on, it also added to the types of lists it had, the list of intangible heritage. Because until then, a lot of historians said the only way we can write history is by using written sources, because written sources would be more objective than oral history. But what we need to take into account when we build our history, when we look together, when we look back on the past, that it is also about what people handed over from generation to generation. That is intangible history. It's the way we cook, it's the way we dance, it's the way we make music together. That is all part of our history. It was built under circumstances that are incomprehensible nowadays to look back upon, but it's really important when we try to look back at who we are as a people. So, this international platform, this putting on the agenda that we need to take a broader look, really helped in the Netherlands. Not by itself, because you can't really, change always comes from outside, but you can't change anything without the help of people from the inside. So here in the Netherlands, it was a large group of people, mostly from a Surinamese and an Afro-Caribbean background, that spoke about the need to include colonial history as part of national history in the Netherlands. So that is really important. So if you take all of that together, the international context that was changing, the activists that spoke out here, and the academic field, that is a bit different from the museum field in the sense that they are more able to address parts of history that museums were hesitant to talk about, because museums need to bring across a large amount of visitors. If we don't find the visitors that want to come to our exhibitions, we can't exist. So we are very much dependent on the public opinion of what people want to see. And the academic field is much more independent. So they pushed the envelope on the type of knowledge we had. And in turn, the museums could use what the academic field was doing to be able to build exhibitions on. So what happened here in the zeros in 2003, we looked back on 140 years of the abolition of slavery. And then the whole lobby of activists here, they saw to it that the first monument was erected in the Netherlands. The monument in Amsterdam that really brought about that the commemoration of slavery took off. So since then we've been building a yearly commemoration in which every few years the Queen used to be present, now the King is present. So it is something that is slowly dawning on people that this is a national commemoration and that it relates to all of us. In 2002 and 2003, it was also the beginning of the NINSE, the first European research institute and museum that paid attention to slavery history. And back then I was part of a group of authors that got the assignment to do the book that you see here on the left-hand side, which was an assignment done by transmitted by the Museum Association. And the Museum Association asked us to go by libraries, archives and museums and ask them for their collections and ask whether their collections were connected to the slavery past or not. And we also came here to Middelburg, by the way. we were met with a lot of skepticism at that time, People were amazed that we were thinking that their collections, which were the collections that spoke to the Dutch past, that they were related to what happened in their eyes a long way from here, a long time ago. So it was a beginning, and I think it was really important, but at the same time, we were not there yet. Because what happened in the 10s is that oh no, let me go back, sorry. The first 2 cabinets Rutte came about, and the little progress that we had made until then was turned on its head, because there were a lot of budget cuts going on, a lot of museums had to let go of people. So for instance, the NINSE, they had huge budget cuts, which meant that they could not be a museum anymore. The Tropical Museum had to let go of a lot of people. So that really changed the field and the way that people were able to address that slavery past. Museums did less of it, and at the same time, a lot of people chose to become cultural entrepreneurs. So they chose to become freelancers and to start their own new organizations and speak about that colonial past nonetheless. And that is, for example, became the Black Archives with Mitchell Esaias and Jessica de Abreu, the Black Heritage Tours of Jennifer Tush. I was working at the Tropical Museum at the moment. I started my company, which is Passado Presente in The Hague. So it was a way in which people tried to address that there was a continued underrepresentation or marginalization of the colonial past in the institutional world. And what it brought about actually was an increased specialization outside of the museums. And that in the end helped, because a lot of museums could see that those cultural entrepreneurs and what they did, that it did speak to people, that there were enough people that were interested in looking at that slavery past. Those were, for large part, younger people, more activist people sometimes, people who had a very different frame of reference. They had other books, they had read other books than people within the institutions had done. They were more diverse, more knowledgeable about the slavery past in itself. And that went to show to the institutional world that it was actually the institutional world that needed to catch up. It was actually the institutional world that before had said, this just isn't important enough, that saw that it was important and that they needed to broaden what their frame of reference was, and they needed to broaden what they were able to do. So it meant that curators and conservators had to work harder. Before, conservators could, they knew their collections and they knew everything about it, and that was it. But since collections are becoming more accessible from the outside, since all kinds of expertise can look within those collections and draw their conclusions and do their own research, the curator has to become more of a director, actually, a director of what their collection is, and to work together with all this new knowledge to build what they know. So the roles be completely changed. In the zeros, from 2003 to 2013, the Rijksmuseum was closed for renovations. And during that time we had a director, everybody knows him, it's Pim Bijbes. He was wonderful at launching a new museum. And in that time it was very much about what constitutes the Dutch identity. People wanted to hear the singular narrative of the Netherlands. So that was what he set out to do. At the time there was also talk about a national history museum. So people were very much focused on telling that singular story. after the reopening of the Rijksmuseum, a new director came along, Taco Dibbets, and his background was much more international. So he had seen in other European museums, other European countries, that they spoke about the history of slavery, and that's what he wanted to do. Because until then, we had exhibitions of slavery here in the Netherlands, but they were always done by smaller museums, maritime museums, the Tropical Museum, for example. It had not been done yet by the National Museum of the Netherlands. So that's what Taco wanted to do. So he knew that if the Rijksmuseum was going to do that, that they needed to bring in that knowledge from outside of the museum. The museum could not do it with just the people they had. It is something that you have to build together. So the first thing that the museum set out to do is to broaden its team of curators, and you see the four of us standing here. You see the team, the think tank that was brought together because we needed to address such a large amount of knowledge that was just not, we were not able to find it in a few heads. We needed a lot of heads to think with us. And we needed to bring in not just academic knowledge of different regions and of different eras in the whole colonial era, but we also needed to bring in the sensitivities of different groups that feel either a personal connection to that history or a less personal connection, but that could help us sharpen our minds before the exhibition was opened. So we set out to do not an exhibition out of the museum and then present it and have the world comment on it. We brought in that world in the 3-4 years that we worked on the exhibition. And that was a hard process, I can tell you, because all of us had different frames of reference, all of us had different skill sets, all of us had different ideas, and that makes it hard, but it makes it really worth your while at the same time. So the assignment that we got was to make this personal. Make this an exhibition not just about ships sailing across oceans, about peoples without faces that were part of that, not just about the people who were wealthy and powerful at the time, but make this about all of those people, the people who were enslaved, the people who fled slavery or resisted slavery, the people who enslaved people. All of those positions, but make it about their personal lives so that you can see what the difference is or what the relationship is between that larger system on the one hand, but within that, the personal roles of people who either built that system or who helped pull it apart, but so that people could relate to what would I have done if I had lived, if I were in the shoes of those people. Would I be courageous enough to fight it? Would I be just part of the system? And that was what we set out to do. So, it brought us a lot of insights, I can tell you. And one of the main things is that we wanted to do an exhibition. We could do an exhibition bringing in objects from all over the world, speaking about other people in other countries, doing what other museums had already done. But we wanted to make it personal for the museum as well. So it should be about us. It should be about our collection. Not because we are so big, but because we had something to put right. We had something to gain. We had something to be responsible for. So one of the things that it brought us was a new way of looking at that collection. And one of the main paintings in the Gallery of Honor, right next to the Night Watch, is this painting by Bartholomeus van der Helst. And I want to shut my mouth for a little bit and just hear what you have to say about this painting. If you look at it, what do you see?
Male only.
Male only. Good point. What else? A cute dog. I think, yes. Lots of arms, and I don't like arms, so yeah, that's true
Arrogant
as
people.
well. What kind of people?
Arrogant people. Extremely arrogant.
The way he pushes his belly forwards. Yes, arrogance is absolutely there.
Only one black person.
Yes, thank you. Who said that? Thank you. And it usually, I ask this all the time, and it usually takes a little while before people see him, which is of course understandable because you see so many glitz and glamour and so much arrogance and so much, well, the small boy in the middle, to me, is unmissable because he's the only one carrying a red cloak and he's right smack bam in the middle. And he's black, so he kind of draws my attention in. But I've stood in front of this painting with so many people and so many people don't see him, which really brought us the insight that it's not objective what you see, it's the way your eye has been trained. It's whether you are trained to see black people or not. So for the longest time, people were not used to seeing them. But once you see them, you find them all over the museum. They are everywhere. But are they meant to be seen? Doesn't look like it, does it? So that was a really, really important insight. And from there on, we built further. So when you walk through the museum, you see lots of important men, arrogance, wealth and power and herbalin coats and beauty. And for the longest time, people said, this is our pride. This is what we want to look back upon. And they took it as something that is objective and that's something that just is. Because all this visual heritage speaks to it. So it would be very possible to just speak about what you see. And for the longest time, the rule was also, we should only speak about what we see. So we could not address questions like, where did that wealth come from? Because that would not be visible on the painting itself. So we arranged rules that would make it even more difficult to address, to bring in a critical note working with this exhibition. But once we really took off and dove in and looked at this same collection, we realized that it is more than logical that the colonial period and the colonial hierarchies are paramount in this collection, because it is about wealth. Where did the wealth come from? It is about administrative relationships between here and other parts of the world. It is about conquest, and it is about ruling from Europe in other parts. So the colonial relationship is all over the place, and once those eyes opened, you can't close them anymore. So what we chose to do is, for about a year, we had extra texts that addressed what you couldn't see, or that addressed what else we wanted to talk about. And now we have integrated those texts, and they are part of the text you see all the time. But for the longest time, we needed to go through that process of letting people get used to us speaking about other types of things as well. So let me show you what we do now. For example, this golden box, it used to be addressed only from the perspective of art history. So we would speak about everything. Who made the box? What is it made of? What is it worth? So it was about glory, and it was about power. But at the same time, if you take a good look, you see it's about trade. It's about the West India Company. It's about the type of trade they did in ivory, in gold dust, in precious metals. And if you look closely, you also see it's about the trade in people. So that brings about a whole new question set. How did people think when they commissioned to make a box like this? How did they look at the trade in human beings? We don't know yet, but that's something that we need to dive in. And we needed to know more about what could we say about black lives in the Netherlands from the 17th, 18th centuries on. And for the longest time in art history, whenever you saw a painting with a main character of the Dutch elite, and then at his or her side you saw a servant, from the art history perspective, it was said those people are not really people. They were tropes. They were not really living here in the Netherlands. They were a symbolic addition to underscore the wealth and the power of the main person in the painting. But once you dive into the archives, you get to read about the lives of people who really lived here. And then, if you go back to the collections, you look at those collections from a new point of view. So what you see there, the collar, for the longest time these collars were categorized as collars worn by pets. But if you look closely, you never see pets wearing metal collars, because those would be really uncomfortable, of course. But you do see them around the necks of people who were enslaved, or who were brought to the Netherlands in slavery. Not just servants, but also if they had other positions, like this man, who is the drummer. He is the first person on a horse that drums the beat that the others have to follow. So he's not a servant, he's really somebody who's at the front of a military expedition. But also he had to wear a collar, or he's at least depicted with a collar. So you see that people who were living here, even though that legal law, the legal rules were that enslavement was not possible here, that they still were otherized by using a collar like that. So there's so much more that we need to know about the lives and just looking at where I am at the moment. Yeah, about Dutch identity, because Dutch identity is always thought about as being purely white. But if these people have been here for centuries, why didn't we include them in our thinking? So we need to revisit that. Now, a third turn that we made in looking at our own collection is that there is so much more to be discovered. By bringing in other disciplines, by looking at not just the written sources, but also at oral sources, and seeing if we cross-reference them with other types of expertise, what we could find out. So this collection that I just showed you is obviously never built to speak about the lives of those who were enslaved, and certainly not about the lives of those who fled slavery. But we know from oral history that the Maroon people in Suriname, the people who built their own new societies by fleeing slavery, that they spoke about women who enabled the building of those new societies by bringing food with them, rice in this case. They hid the rice in their hair, and by planting the rice, they made it possible that these whole new societies could thrive and survive in the hinterland of Suriname. But for the longest time it was not trusted, this oral source. So we brought in Tinde van Andel, a professor of biology, who did DNA researches into different types of rice. And she was able to prove to us that rice that is found on the coast of West Africa and that is found among the Maroon people in Suriname, is not found anywhere else. So this rice could only have been brought over by the women in the way that the oral history taught us, because if it was brought over by the colonists, we would have found the rice on the plantations, but that is not the case. So that is really important to us, that our collection not only speaks to the powerful and the wealthy, but also, for example, about Maroon people, because this is a small part of a large silk map that we have that was made for the Society of Suriname, which was based in Amsterdam. And if you look closely, you could have known all along that this story was true, because if you look closely, you see people fleeing, and you see people wearing skirts, and you see them carrying small bags, which is obviously the way that people thought it was brought to the hinterland of Suriname, not knowing that it was hidden in the hair of women. So this was something that the soldiers did know, but that we did not pass along, so we can't talk about it now unless we bring in these other sources. One of the things we thought was really important as well, as much knowledge as we brought together, that this was something that is important to all of society. So we should not just present it, we should enable visitors to reflect on it and to do their own thing with it. So what we did, and Damien already talked about monuments being taken down everywhere, we wanted to do something about that. So in the last gallery of the exhibition, we put down 10 pedestals, empty pedestals, and we let people reflect on the 10 personal stories in the exhibition and build their own new monuments, reflecting on those people. And we were not saying that those 10 people were all necessarily heroes, but they are all part of us, our ancestors, of what we look back upon. So they are all part of what we need to reflect upon. And what I really liked is all of those 10 people had their own stories, their own ways of relating to being the guilty party in this. And the first pedestal was about a man who was taken from Africa and brought into slavery. And what you mostly saw, what visitors left behind, was a feeling of empathy. So everybody was kind of into, yes, let's talk about slavery, this is important. But pedestal number 9 was about Dirk van Hogendorp, who was a public servant who spoke about the abolition of slavery. And then in the end, when it turned out that abolishing slavery would affect his own income, he changed his mind. And he went back to be a plantation owner, and he went back to buying people and enslaving them. So that is also something that we need to think about and reflect upon. Because if you go to the HEMA and you find a t-shirt of €5 and you find another one of 15, which one do you buy? And what I really liked is that people were willing to reflect upon that as well. Just not just point a finger, but also look into yourself and see what you're able to do. What is your responsibility in the here and now? So we worked on the exhibition for over 3 years, 4 curators and lots of people. So I feel really lucky to be able to have done that. We really were able to bring about new research and speak about that. But then COVID hit, and we had to postpone because the museum was closed, and then we had to postpone again, and then we couldn't postpone anymore because everything that you loan from another exhibition or another museum, it is being shipped to a next exhibition. So we just had to open, even if you couldn't receive the amount of visitors that you would like to receive. So what really helped is that the NOS came, the National Television of the Netherlands, and they said, we would like to help we would like to transmit the exhibition, the opening of the exhibition, on national television. So that gave us a platform that we could not have had otherwise. And since the king had already said that he would open the exhibition, that came together, and I think a lot of people looked at the opening more than we could have been able to receive physically at the museum. So that was really important. What it helped us transmit is the idea that this history is part of national history, that this history for the longest time was seen as something that was polarizing, but that the polarizing part came because it was hidden under the carpet. Once you bring it out and once you speak about it as grown-ups, then it becomes something that is cohesive. It is not something that you necessarily need to be ashamed about because it happened a long time ago. You would need to be ashamed about it if you don't speak about it in the here and now, because this is what we can change, the here and now. And it was so impressive to see the king. I mean, the collection, you just saw it, is very closely connected to his family, to his ancestors, and he was very open to speaking about it. So I think that that started changing the way people looked at it. This happened in 2021, the opening, and then the year after, 2022. The state set out, commissioned to do research into the responsibility that the state bore in enabling this whole system of slavery and colonization. And this had been done before by other cities who looked at their own responsibility and on the basis of that research apologized. So the whole idea was that the research had to come first and then maybe an apology would come. But in the meantime, this Prime Minister we have, Mark Rutte, who was at the beginning in the tense of all the budget cuts and all the changes in the institutional world, who lots of times had said that this is not really our national history, this is not of our concern, he became so, he was so touched by what he found out and what he saw happening that he said, I'm not going to wait for this research to finish. I'm going to apologize here and now. And he did that in December 2022. And in his speech, he addressed a lot of things that really helped bring about a change, because he recognized things that researchers, that museums had been fighting against for a long time. For one, historians for the longest time said you can't relate what happened in the 17th century directly to racism and discrimination in the here and now, because it's just too far apart. But in his speech, he just took it together and he said this is important because there is a continuation. And of course, it is not history yet, so it's not up to historians to find out, to do that research, but it's up to other expertise to do that. So we need to bring sociologists, anthropologists, all kinds of expertise together to have a broader look of what it has meant and what it means in the here and now. So what this brought about, and I think it was so grand of him that he just said, I was wrong before, that really helped people realize that you don't need to be right all the time. It's all right to not know everything. It's all right to just accept that. And I think that it helped that after the comma, the acceptance of the fact that the colonial system was an unjust system, because for the longest time, the public debate was about yes or no. Should we be addressing this? Should we be talking about this? Is this important or not? After his speech, people came to accept that, just like the Second World War, this is something that is in the past, but it was not just. It was onrechtvaardig. And from there on, we can talk again. So It is the recognition that wealth and power were built at the expense of the people who were enslaved and oppressed and exploited. That is a huge difference. So since then, the king has installed 2 commissions that are going to look into the connection between his family history and the colonial past. There's a separate commission that is going to look at the collections of the royal family and whether there are any objects in there that need to go back to the original countries they came from. And the state has brought out July 1st this extensive study as well. And in this study, it is not meant to be the end of what we do in research, but it needs to put in an agenda. So it needs to speak about what we hope that researchers in the future will do. So I wrote a chapter in it about the collection of the Netherlands and what I hope will be our research agenda of the future. We have just bought this new painting, which is quite unique. We didn't have anything like it, in which you see a market and you see 2 types of relationships with the black presence in the Netherlands. You see a man standing here being part of what looks like a circus, or we really don't know yet what it means, but we need to find out because it is so the opposite of the rest of the collection that we do have. So this brings more diversity into that collection. And then if you look over here, it also addresses the way that, the allegorical way that Europe, Africa, other parts of the world have been brought into the public domain. Then, a second thing I really hope that people will look more into is we have this toegepaste kunst, all kinds of furniture and all kinds of stuff that is used on a daily basis by people, in which you see that black people are depicted also in allegorical ways, addressing hierarchies in the world that we just don't know enough about. For the longest time it was said, well, we just copied that because they did that in Italy, so we needed to have some of that as well. But we need to understand better what is the way of thinking. Why would you work on such a cabinet and then put it in your living room and look at that every day? It needs to have a message, and we are looking into that. We would want to know more about that. Then, this exhibition is kind of, we now say at the museum, the gift that keeps on giving, because temporary exhibitions last for only 3-4 months. But this one just keeps giving. So we were approached by the United Nations that invited us to bring the exhibitions to their headquarters in New York. So what we did is we translated the exhibition in a 2-dimensional form on paper. So pictures and text would transmit the whole exhibition, and then in the middle we had one central object, which was a footstock, which was actually from the south of the Netherlands. And then we had the opportunity to build a program around that. So we invited museum directors from the Caribbean, Alessandra Cummins. We invited this amazing speaker from the USA. He's the director of the Equal Justice Initiative, a museum in Alabama. He's a human rights activist and a lawyer, and the best speaker you will ever hear. If you go to the website of the UN, you can still listen to his speech. So we had the opportunity to bring this conversation to the United Nations and to raise it up again from the national Dutch level to back to the international level, to speak to people from all different kinds of the world that have a connection to this history. And it really touched my heart. I mean, on the one hand, people from the Caribbean, people from all kinds of countries came to me and said, I'm so proud that my part of history is now being spoken about on this level. And on the other hand, if I gave them a tour to the exhibition and I showed them what we did, I showed them that we used completely different types of objects than had been used in slavery exhibitions before, they were amazed as well that there are new insights into this exhibition, into this theme. So, for example, we use Rembrandt paintings to address slavery. We use the painting of Opium, one of our prides, one of our central paintings that we co-owned with the Louvre, to speak about the connection between Amsterdam and Brazil. So Opium had two husbands, she had a father, all of them involved in the sugar industry, and one of her husbands fathered a child with an enslaved woman. So you can get to ask all these new questions looking at Rembrandt, looking at Opium, about what would she have known. Would she have known that her future children already had a half sister in Brazil whose mother was enslaved? So that really brought new dimensions, new layers to the way we speak about slavery. And what was really interesting as well is that lots of people came to me and said, how did you guys do it? You're such a small country and your prime minister apologized. We want our prime minister to apologize as well. So tell us, how do you do it? And I said, well, it's because we're a small country that we get to do things a little bit faster maybe than other countries have. But it gave us a lot of, as a country, the Netherlands, a lot of admiration from other countries. So the United Nations took that two-dimensional version and made it into a downloadable version, which can now be seen in different parts of the world. It has already traveled to Mexico, to Geneva, it will next go to Paris, and I think Brussels. And it is also now here in the Netherlands. This is the Ministry of Finance. So the Netherlands has had a few scandals in the last few years about the institutional world and the way they connect to people from different backgrounds. And it's exactly at those institutions where the exhibition will be visible in the coming months. So it starts here at the Ministry of Finance. It will next go to the tax administration. It will go to the, I don't know how to say that in English, the toeslagendienst as well, and the douane. So it will really make an impact on people to slowly just get to relate to this history. And people have already told me that they have seen it. I mean, they take their coffee there. It's the central courtyard of the Ministry of Finance. They do their coffees, they pass by that every time. And it just slowly becomes part of their awareness. So now people ask me all the time, so what are the next steps for the Rijksmuseum? Does this mean that we get to focus on the colonial past more than ever? And of course I understand, since it is my specialization and I've become the head of the department. But of course the department is much larger than I am. So we are at about 20 people, curators, researchers that are looking into provenance as well. So together we have a wide range of expertise. One of the things that the Rijksmuseum is focusing on at the moment is our women's project. And that really helps, I feel, because whenever I say to people, you know what, for the longest time you couldn't see any women on our walls either. And still, they are half of our society. So underrepresentation doesn't mean that people who have less of a say in our history are trying to gain more of presence than they should. Underrepresentation has everything to do with how we selected and the way we felt that history should be spoken about. So it was about this very small selection of people, while we should be talking about much more people. So we want to have more presence of women and their role in society. We want to speak about regional variety and about the differences between classes and how they relate to our collection. Because, well, it is just all intricately intertwined. And then we want to talk about more than just slavery. So this painting you see on your right hand side, this is, we believe, Christophe Lemoore, a man who lived in Antwerp, which was then part of the Netherlands, 100 years before the Dutch became involved in slavery. So this was a free man. This was long before we ever thought that there was a hierarchy between peoples in around the world. So we can talk about more than just one way of relating to each other. What we are doing at the Rijksmuseum, we have just started a new process of building a new, how do you say that, permanent exhibition. And we want to build that on 4 pillars, and those will be creation, mobility, identity, and sustainability. And our mission has always been to connect people through history and art, so we will continue on with that. And what we want to do with all these different types of stories is we want to give them a platform, but we want very much to not do that parallel. It is not about him one day and then another day about her. It is about the interconnection of all those things. So it's not polyphony in a way that it doesn't connect, but it is about what happened in the moment that this black presence came about, and how did that change the way that Dutch people related to art and history. So it's very much intertwined. Then there is one more thing that is part of my department. I already said it, provenance research, because the way that we've assembled our collections has sometimes touched upon periods of injustice. So in the Second World War, a lot of tens of thousands of objects came into museum collections while they were taken from Jewish people under the Nazi regime. So we need to address that, we need to know more about that, and we have done that in silence for 10 years, the past 10 years, and we've now come to the conclusion that this is not something administrative that you just tick a box and you give back a few objects and then it's done. This is something that we need to address on a permanent basis. So that's why these provenance researchers have now become part of the Department of History, so that we take them their input as part of what we are presenting on a regular basis. And now, since a year, I have also one provenance researcher which is completely dedicated to the colonial past. And at the moment, there's 6 objects that have been decided by the Restitution Committee that they should go back to Sri Lanka. You see the cannon here. There's also other weapons that will be going back, and that will happen next month. So this is an exciting new era in the way that we speak about public connections, public collections, and public connections. So I think if you look at what has happened in the last, 30 years, and where we are now, I think you can speak about a paradigm shift. And what's happening is that I spoke about that international level, I spoke about the people who started their own organizations in the institutional world. And what you see in this picture is all of that together again. Because that is Lonnie Bunch, who we had the honor of receiving here in the Netherlands in the last month. He used to be the director of the African American Museum, the first slavery museum in the United States. He's now the head of the whole of Smithsonian, 21, soon to be 23 museums that as a conglomerate speak about the identity of the US. So it was ideal for us to pick his brain and learn everything that we could learn about his process. Then next to him you see Wim Pijbes, the former director of the Rijksmuseum, who is currently the director of Droom en Daad in Rotterdam, which is the foundation that erected a controversial, gorgeous, beautiful statue right in front of the station in Rotterdam of a young black woman with her hands in her pockets, a statue which we had never seen before in the Netherlands, and that adds so much to the way that we relate to each other and to our identity. And that is done by Droom en Daad because they are really financially independent. They can just think of something and do it. So that is an important thing to keep in mind. And then you see Mitchell Assayas, who is doing such great work with a specialized form of looking at the past. Peggy Brandon, who is one of the directors of the Slavery Museum, and then myself, the Rijksmuseum, all of us together, all of us rethinking our positions. And on the one hand, it is wonderful that we are in this next phase in which we agree that the colonial past is something that we need to deal with. And on the same hand, it is also kind of uncomfortable because all of us need to find out again what your position really is. What are you going to do in this new step? And I think uncomfortability is kind of good because it pushes you to do something that you have not done before. But, well, sometimes I think a lot of us wake up at night and, yeah. Let me see. I've come to my last slide. Last month was not only the October, the Black Achievement Month, it was also the History Month. All of the History Month sees a lot of events looking at Dutch history. It's more popular than ever. Who ever thought that history is grey and old and stuffy? It's not. It's more alive than ever. Everybody wants to do something with history. And at the end of the month, there's always the night of de Nacht van de Geschiedenis, the night of history at the Rijksmuseum. And this time, part of our program was a book presentation. We worked on a book, the Rijksmuseum, the Museum of World Cultures, which comprises of 4 museums. Together, we had always addressed the Rijksmuseum, Dutch National Museum, and then the anthropological museums, they looked at the way that Dutch history, they looked at the history of the other, actually. Collections brought together to the Netherlands, but by people from the Netherlands. So they actually did speak about the Netherlands, but very much through the story of the other. So those 2 museums came together, and then we brought in a lot of other people as well and asked them, what kind of objects would you like to talk about? What are the objects that every Dutch person should know if he wants to understand a little bit about our history, about colonial history? And we brought all of that together in that book, Our Colonial Past in 50 Objects. And all of those people came together at the right of the museum, and we gave the first copy to our Ministry of Education and Culture and Science. And he spoke so beautifully about where we are now. He spoke about what is important to look back upon. He spoke quite long about Tula, the man from Curacao, an enslaved man who led a rebellion and in the end was given the death penalty by the colonial governors at the time, but has now been rehabilitated. Now the state says we need to look at people like Tula from a different angle. We need to see them as heroes. So he said, we are gaining clarity, we are uncovering lives and names by making new sources accessible, by combining different types of sources, and we need to speak about this in all these different types of ways. So he said this commemorative year is a new common start in which we look for a common past and a common future. And to me, that has really given us wings in the Rijksmuseum as well, because what we really want to do is to continue this path of new relationships, new research, new historiography, to be able to present everybody with a complex story of the Netherlands in relation to the world, so not just within our boundaries, but in relation to the world, including all that has happened, that which we do not want to repeat, but need to remember, and everything that we gain strength from. Thank you.